Hi, in this presentation, we'll take a look at the integrated reasoning section of GMAT. So we'll look at two things about the IR, how it is scored, what kind of a score you need to get, and the question formats that are asked in IR. So some key facts that you need to be clear about. First and foremost, the IR score is given to you as a separate score on the GMAT scorecard. In other words, your IR score does not influence the 800 GMAT score. The 800 score is a function of two sections, quant and verbal. IR and AWA are scored separately, so they have no impact on the 800 score for GMAT. Now, IR is scored out of 8 points. Minimum score that is given is 2, and it's given in multiples of 1, which means you can get any score 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 8. Now, this is an important aspect of IR that you need to be clear about, which is that whenever you have questions that contain sub-questions within them, you need to get all those sub-questions right in order to get the question right. For example, if there are two sub-questions for a given question and you get one right and one wrong, it counts as a wrong answer. It does not count as a half mark or something like that, which is what you probably got in school. But on IR, you have to get all correct to get the question correct. Otherwise, it is counted as incorrect. And this is one of those things that makes IR slightly more challenging, because let's say you have 3 sub-questions and you get 2 of them right and 1 of them goes wrong. It upsets the whole thing, and it is equivalent to getting all 3 wrong. In other words, if you had just guessed on that question, you would have gained the same outcome, whereas you might invest time, get 2 of them right, but in a hurry, if you get the 3rd one wrong, it kind of nullifies all that effort very quickly. So you need to be aware and careful of this as well. Just as you have seen on the rest of the GMAT, you need to submit a question before you can proceed. You cannot move on to the next question on IR until and unless you have submitted the answer to the given question, which means marking the responses to all the sub-questions where there are sub-questions. And once again, as we are aware of on the rest of the GMAT, you cannot go back to a question. You can only move forward. And for a given set of information, you may get more than one question in the IR. Now, in all, you will be given 12 questions. And when we say 12 questions, these are 12 main questions, which means these 12 questions may or may not contain sub-questions. So some of them may contain 2 sub-questions, some of them may contain 3 sub-questions, some of them may not contain any sub-question. So in this way, you have 12 big questions. And to get each of these big questions right, as we just touched upon previously, you need to get each of the sub-questions right as well. Now, the questions that you see will be divided into 4 question types. They will not be grouped. In other words, you will not get them in a consecutive fashion for each question type. They'll all be jumbled up, and you can expect approximately 3 from each, though there's no compulsion that there'll be exactly 3 from each. Now, what are these 4 question formats that they use on the IR? The first is what is called graphics interpretation. So these, as the name suggests, are graphs that you'll be looking at, or in other words, it's graphic data that you'll be looking at. A second question type, and we'll see each of these in detail shortly. A second question type is called 2-part analysis. Another question type, again, the name is self-explanatory, is called table analysis. And a 4th question type is called multi-source reasoning. Multi-source because the information can come from more than one source. Now let's look at each of these question types in some more detail. So the first question type is graphics interpretation. Data is presented in graphic form, and you might be familiar with some graphic presentations such as pie charts, bar graphs, line graphs, which you might be using. However, on GMAT, when we talk of graphics interpretation, you can be looking at almost any kind of graphic data. We can take a look quickly at some examples from the GMAT website, mba.com, where they have given some sample questions. So as you can see here, this is an example of graphic data. This is obviously a Venn diagram kind of representation in this example. This is yet another example of graphic data. As you can see here, it's fairly complicated. It's not something that you will be able to relate to instantly. You are given 30 minutes to answer the IR section, and 12 questions is what you have to deal with. So we are looking at approximately 2.5 minutes per question on IR. And something like this can pose a very big challenge from the time point of view. Moreover, you have to remember that there will be 2 sub-questions that come for every graphics question type. So you have to answer both these. You have to understand this information and answer both the sub-questions correctly in approximately 2.5 minutes. This is yet another example of graphic representation. So as we are seeing, these are the sub-questions. You have a drop-down. You have to choose the correct answer. This is the second sub-question. You have a drop-down here. You can choose its answer, and then you submit. And if both these are correct, it's counted as a correct response. So this is one question we are looking at out of 12. Yet another example of graphic data. Again, as we can see, sub-question 1, sub-question 2. If you answer both correctly, it's counted as one correct response on IR. This is yet another example. So these were some situations we looked at of the type graphics interpretation. So as we saw in the examples, there were 2 sub-questions, and the requirement, of course, is to get both right. The second question type is what is called 2-part analysis. The information that you'll be looking at will be in text form, and the reason why it's called 2-part analysis is that you see these columns of radio buttons, and you have to click one each to get the question right. So let's again visit the website to take a look at some examples of 2-part analysis. So as you can see here, this is the information given to you, and there's a specific question asked. You have to make one selection in each column. So if I choose these 2, based on the conditions, I have to check which of these is the answer for this column and which of these is the answer for this column. And once I make a selection and submit, it's a correct combination of 2 radio buttons that we are always looking at in this question type. Now, as we can also see here, in the previous example, it's quite clear that we are looking at some kind of mathematical information. We are looking at data given in kilometers per hour. We are looking at some variables being defined, and we have some numeric values as well. So this is one of the variations that you get in 2-part analysis, wherein you are dealing with numeric data. But the other variation that you get is where you are dealing with non-numeric data, and mostly it will be a logical kind of a question, a logic problem in a way. So here we are just dealing with some logical information, and then logically we have to answer 2 sub-questions, and the correct combination is what you'll have to mark to get this right. So this is yet another example online of another logical kind of a question where there is no numeric data involved. It's just logically we have to work something out. This is an example they have given of numeric data. As you can see, lots of numeric data here. Another example of numeric data. So these are some of the questions given online. So as we just saw, we have to choose one radio button each to get these questions right. The correct combination is what you have to mark, and there is only one correct combination. The next question type on IR is called table analysis. So as the name suggests, you'll be looking at tabular data. Each question in this format is accompanied by 3 sub-questions. And you'll be looking at tabular data like this with a very important function, which is the sort. So let's take a look at some examples online. So as we can see here, they have given us a table containing some information. There is a sort drop down available. It's very similar to the sort functionality that you use in Excel. And on this sort, as we can see, we can sort on any of the columns available to us. So these are the columns given, and we can sort on any of these columns. So if I sort on public library, for instance, as you can see, it has arranged all these values in ascending order. If I sort on Natural History Museum, as you can see, it has arranged all these values in ascending order. So we have the sort tool available, which is a very useful tool. In fact, most of the questions depend only on sorting. So table analysis is not about number crunching. By the way, on the IR section, you are allowed to use an online calculator. So you'll see this calculator button available on the top left of your screen. And if you click it, a small calculator will open up, which, as you can see, only has the basic functionality. If at all you need to make any calculations in IR, you can always use this calculator. This is just a picture they have given here on the website. It's not a real calculator, so it won't work. This is another example they have given of tabular data. As you can see, this is a much bigger table, and sometimes so much of information might seem a bit intimidating to you at first. But remember, with the help of the sort tool, things can become fairly simple. For example, we are looking at the rank out here. So if I simply sort on passenger rank, I'm very quickly getting this particular column in ascending order. And if I had to answer questions in terms of who had the middle rank, the median value, for example, I know I have to just locate something in the middle. If I want to know who has the lowest rank, I know this is the city I'm talking about. Highest rank, I know which is the city I'm talking about. So it's basically, questions are going to be driven by logical sorting. And once you sort, you just have to then interpret the information to answer the question. So that's the objective of this question type. It does not involve any kind of number crunching. And if at all there is something you may have to do, you have the online calculator available. Remember, the online calculator is available only for the IR section. It is not available for the rest of the GMAT. And the fourth question type that is asked is called multi-source reasoning. So you have more than one source of information out here, which comes from one of 3 tabs. These are similar to the tabs that we see on the browser, which is what we have been clicking right now. In fact, I'm going to just click another tab to move to this question. So as we can see, these are the tabs given to us. And as I'm clicking on each tab, the content under that tab is visible to us. And as you can see, at a time, we can only read the content under one of the tabs. Now, this content that you are seeing here could be a text form, it could even be a graph, it may even be a table. So you can get various types of information from each of these tabs. So you'll be finding 3 tabs. You have to read the information in all the 3. And then, as you can see, this is just one question that we are looking at, which contains 3 sub-questions. So once I click, let's say, this combination, and if I submit it, and if the combination of the 3 is correct, which means I've answered all 3 sub-questions correctly, only then will this be counted as a correct response, and this is one question. The good part about multi-source reasoning is that for the same set of tabs, in other words, for the same information, you get usually three questions, three proper questions, which means this is one of them we are seeing. This is another question which is based exactly on the same information that we just saw. So this is counted as yet another question, and similarly there will be a third. So in terms of time management, you have some advantage because you have to invest time understanding the information in the tabs once, and thereafter, based on that, you'll be able to answer around three questions. It's similar to reading comprehension, where you have a long passage, but once you have understood the passage, it allows you to answer around three questions. And as we are also seeing that this example doesn't contain sub-questions. So this is one full question. This is just a normal question with 5 options. You click an answer, you submit. If it's right, it's a right answer. It's one out of those 12 questions. So these are things that we already touched upon in terms of the type of information. And 3 main questions, and within each you may or may not have sub-questions. So with this, we have seen the 4 question formats that are used on IR. The next thing you may want to know is how significant or how important is the IR score when you apply to B schools or other programs, and what kind of a score should you be aiming for. So let's touch upon this. Now, most master's programs, when we say masters, we are talking of a master's in management versus an MBA, which is different. We are just talking of a master's in management, or maybe even a master's in science and MS program with finance specialization. All these courses ask for the GMAT. So a master's in science with some finance specialization or accounting or some such thing. Most of these master's courses do not really look at AWA and IR, so they're most likely going to ignore the IR score. They will base a decision on the main GMAT score out of 800. On the other hand, most MBA programs will take a look at your IR as well, and maybe quite seriously, because especially the top ranked schools, because it's a very competitive environment out there and candidates are applying to these schools with good GMAT scores, good profiles, and good AWAs and good IRs as well. So for a top ranked school, you just cannot ignore IR. You have to get a decent score, ideally a good score, but at least a decent score in IR as well. So the next question is, what is a good score? Obviously 8 on 8 perfect score is going to be an excellent score always, but even a 7 is a very high score. In fact, even the 7 score puts you in the 80th percentile. So that's good enough a score in any such competitive exam. And to achieve a score of 7, you need to get approximately 8 questions right out of 12. And this allows you to strategize on the IR. In case you are running out of time, you can always abandon 1 or 2 terrible questions. We had a look at a graph when we saw graphics interpretation. If you're unable to comprehend that graph and time is running out, you just might want to guess and move on, because you have a buffer of approximately 4 questions available to you. So one way of looking at it is you just answer 8 questions well and get all of them right, or you answer 10 out of 12 well, leave as in mark and move on, and hope to get 8 on 10 right, which is possible if you leave out the worst 2, let's say. If you're able to take that call and you leave out the worst 2, out of the remaining 10, answering 8 correctly should not be a problem in IR, because it's a mixed bag. Some questions are hard, but many others are fairly workable. And on the lower side, try to achieve a score of at least 6. Anything below 6 may be looked at negatively by schools that seriously look at IR. And to get a 6 in IR, you need approximately 6 right, 6 wrong. This kind of a combo will give you a 6. So again, in terms of strategy, if you look at time management with a target of just 6 and not all 12 correct, suddenly you have a lot of time per question. So you can strategize in that way and at least achieve this kind of a minimum score in this section. So that's all for the IR overview.